Welcome, everybody, to the Better Learning Podcast. I'm Jeff Kubiak with K-12, and I'm with Carla Cummins and the one and only Jesse Miller. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you share a little bit about the Jesse Miller background and story, and we will get started.
Sure. Wanted me to take it from birth, Jeff, or just my professional career?
Would actually like you to call your mother because that's
let's go through your ancestry.com. And,
in the architectural field since 2004, graduated with bachelor's, master's degree. Been doing K-12 architecture for my entire career, working with schools primarily in California, Nevada, and Texas. So I have worked across the United States. Worked for a few different firms. Currently, PBK Architects is where I call home. The ability of my position currently is I am the managing senior principal of the West region for PBK, overseeing about 270 professionals in our 9 offices located throughout the state of California. All of our markets, K-12, higher education, and our civic practice, they all intertwine together and are all focused essentially on delivering environments for education. So my specialty, and really that's kind of a background intro on my career and where how I've ended up.
I always think of you, and I was telling Jeff because we were there this week, right? And I texted you recently where we were at an event. I think it was here in Arizona, and it was like, "What's your claim to fame?"
Yeah,
and I know yours, but what is it?
Well, I mean, I have so many. So I guess the question is, and I say that with all humbleness of being able to work on some of the best story projects probably that reside in the United States. My real claim to fame, Carla, maybe if you're thinking this, is I started my first job, I worked on the Hotel Del Coronado. But my actual claim to fame probably is you've seen videos of me with Dr. Dre as we've working on the Compton High School, the first one, and then winning the second one for Compton Unified School District Centennial High School, where Dr. Dre actually attended. Kendrick Lamar and the others was able to bring Dr. Dre into our office and do a design charrette with him and some of his friends and work with him to really craft the new Performing Arts Center for the second Compton High School and let him tell us what these educational spaces should be based on his obviously amazing knowledge of the music industry. So that was a really exciting time, learning from probably one of the greatest producers of all time to understand how to design these student-centered spaces that would give the biggest impact for the kids of Compton to step right into the career paths when they graduate. Like, what are they doing right now as Dr. Dre and his studio, and where that future is going was a very exciting time. My other claims to fame, I mean, Palisades High School, we were working on the rebuild of Palisades High School with the devastating fires. I had a massive rebuild for Richmond High School that's going on, and claim to fame there is Coach Carter, if you've seen the movie Coach Carter. So yeah, it's been exciting. I feel very, very humble in the fact that I have been part of such amazing projects over the years that really impacted students and their future. But yes, the Compton Unified ones with Dr. Dre, definitely probably, it's not every day as a K-12 education architect that you find yourself working with one of the masters of the environment. And, but that's an exciting piece. I mean, everyone forgets that all of these famous folk and celebrity, they all came through the education system one way or another, and they do have a background just like we do, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize you've always done education. So did it choose you? Did you choose it?
Well, I would say I didn't always. So my first job out of college, while I was still attending grad school, I was doing healthcare architecture. and really thought healthcare, again, first job out of school, right? So you think, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's so exciting. And so for first 2 years of my career, which I was working full-time while attending grad school full-time and married and had a kid. So that was an interesting couple of years, was in the healthcare sector. Okay. And it kind of worked out where I was working at a firm and we decided to relocate and move, and somehow ended up in the education studio at that firm. And the rest is kind of history. Was able to start, actually my first project in education was a brand new high school. So with the complexities, and as a kid, just freshly, out of grad school with a couple of years working experience, to be put in a new high school and kind of in charge and overseeing construction and understanding why it is what we're creating. It was just such a unique experience that, because some of it was already in construction, I got to experience that ribbon cutting day and all of the great stuff that really make K-12 projects just stand out from any other sector. Because, when we do a ribbon cutting on the healthcare projects, no one was really that excited. But obviously in the education realm, you get the bands, you get the cheerleaders, you get the future students, the educators, and it's a whole community event, harkening back to like the days of yore, where, the schoolhouse was the center of a town, and everyone had pride in their schools, and they had pride in their town based on their school. And so this is what makes it exciting.
Well, and it is like you said it very last, but I think the community gets so excited too. So to be able to walk through and know what that building is going to do within that community and how many kids are going to get funneled through it, right, is such a big thing.
I would say, I always get a tear in my eyes on ribbon cutting day, and, especially Compton High School was definitely, with Dr. Dre as a guest speaker, with over 500 people in attendance, with the bands, with the kids, like, it makes you understand why we do what we do, right? I think even my first real experience, I think that, hit me was a theater I did for Rialto Unified School District back in the day. It was a campus that was built in the 50s, but never had a performing arts center on it. And when we opened that performing arts center, I mean, the whole town came, and we had to keep, we actually had to give tickets to the ribbon cutting ceremony because, we started it outside so the whole town could kind of hear it. But then they were going to do the first ever performance at the ribbon cutting ceremony on campus. And so we had to limit it to the number of seats of the theater. Right. And I wasn't expecting the superintendent and district to invite me up on stage to say a few words and everything like that. But it was just such a beautiful night and a moment. And it just captures the essence of the town. But really more what it captured is, this is the first performance that these kids that grow up in that community, their lives will never not know having a performing arts center on that campus, right? The future generations. And so I'm always big, my team, PBK, hears it all the time. I'm big on just saying, we are impacting not today, the future generations of kids that you don't even know about,
Well, we say on all of our documentation, we have our process. But not in there, the last step of it is legacy, right? Because what you're doing is leaving a legacy. And whether or not it's on the school side or whether or not it's on the design side, no matter where you are, right, within the process of it, ultimately, there is that legacy because I can't even imagine how many kids go through these schools once they're completed, for the life cycle of that facility. So it's a legacy, I think. Jeff, you recently met Jesse. You got any questions for him? What do you need to know?
Well, I'd love to use that term legacy, and I appreciate that Jesse uses it with the folks that he works alongside, because everyone has one. And there's a couple mottos, right? That it's not about, the money you have and the toys you die with. It's about who you have positively impacted. You know, you got your John Woodens and your Coach Carter, like you said, and Dr. Dre, right? So thinking about one of those iconic projects you worked on, Jesse, what would be, if you had to step away tomorrow, what would be kind of legacy-esque for you?
It's an interesting question because of, not because I don't have one, but because I don't think in that terms, right? My whole personal mantra has been to leave education space better than I found it, and how I can impact these students, and not just these students, but the generations and the generations and generations to come. If I use Compton High School as an example, we recently toured 150 educators through that back in September. And the students during that tour set up stations of different areas of campus and what they were doing. So you had guitar studio, you had students in the recording studio mixing demos, you had students in their performing arts center doing a skit, you had folks in math and science and underwater robotics and then just systems set up everywhere. And I still tear up even thinking about it, because it's like those kids were using the spaces that we designed on paper and in our head exactly how we wanted them to, and we're even taking them above. But that's the whole point, right? Was to create these spaces and places that kids can do anything they want, to become anything they want, to better their lives in the future, to better their families' lives in the future. And then you just keep building that rapport. I think, it hit especially hard in a city like Compton, which is very well known across, the globe, probably for not always the reasons it should be known. But there's amazing things happening there. There's amazing stories. But, our high school was the first swimming pool to really exist in the city of Compton, right? So principal said it best at the ribbon cutting is, there will be an Olympic swimmer from Compton one day. Never been there before because they didn't have a pool to practice in, right? So providing these facilities that even Dr. Dre in his speech talked about a certain kind of grit that is the city of Compton. Now they have the spaces. These kids actually have the spaces. They've already had the success without them. Now what could they do with them, right? So when we look at schools and my legacy and the impact I can have on projects, is I find at least the phase that I can do it the best, Jeff, is definitely the programming and original schematic design to ensure we are providing what's next for kids, not what's now, right? I always push, I'm going to speak about it here at the Cash Conference. I always push of what's the next. We talk about next generation, or 21st century learning. We're already in 2026. I don't want to design what's for today. I want to design what's for 70 years from now. These buildings have to last 100 years. School districts can't turn them, in and out that quick. And so what do these spaces and what does teaching even look like? But so the legacy, going back to the legacy, I promise I'm landing my plane soon, but it really is just, how do I spend taxpayer dollars the best way possible for the longest way possible so that these schools, stand an era, right? We're talking about couple generations these schools have to last. The average age of a school in the United States is like 1970, is like the 50 plus years, right? So these things have to last, and they got to be adaptable.
One thing that really resonated with me, what you said, Jesse, was that kids take the space or do things that we have not even yet imagined, right? So they have so much more learning, knowledge, power than we give kids credit for, right? And the work that we are all doing is to help empower and positively impact. And I think it's so important that you brought that up, that you're designing these amazing spaces and you create these things. But when we see kids take it to the next level and the next level, that means we're doing something good, especially like you say, with taxpayer money and trying to be stewards of we were bringing to them, right? That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we always say, look, I wore my shirt. I had a meeting at my daughter's school this morning too. And I walked out and one of the ladies was like, I love that shirt. And I was like, I'll bring them to you. So obviously it says radically student center. It's a term that we use all the time. It's part of our process. So when you hear radically student centered, and I think that you may have answered this before, Jesse, if not, we're just going to have to, it'll be the first time, but what does it mean to you? But I feel like I already have the answer because you just kind of answered.
Yeah, but I think, I've been thinking about it too since we talked about this. And I even seen your guys' logo all over the place, and understanding what K-12 does and further is I've always thought about this too, right? So to me, really being radically student-centered, I've been thinking a lot about it. It basically means every decision, planning, design, budgets, schedules, all the things you think about a construction project, an architectural design project, they're all going to answer one simple question. And that's, will this make a student's daily experience better? Because eventually the building's open. Everyone forgets about the design. Everyone forgets about the construction process, the schedule, what this thing costs. At the end of the day, it's going to be a school and it's going to get opened and it's going to be used for the next 100 years, right? So what we want to create, I think a lot about this as I've worked, and California has some of the strongest teachers unions in the country, and all credit to that. But radically student-centered means this is not the adult experience anymore, right? This is not the maintenance preferred experience. And understanding janitorial staff and all of them, they all matter. Do not get me wrong. But it's not the way we've done schools, right? We haven't done schools for the students, by the students, and how they do, right? There's that clothing company from, I think it's still around, but, FUBU, for us, by us, right?
It's back.
It's back. Okay, it's coming back. For us, by us. And it's like, that's what a school is, right? It should be about the kids. It should be about how they learn. It should be owned by the students, not the staff. And it should be totally focused. Every decision we make every day should be focused on how is this making this space better? Long answer. That's kind of what I've been thinking about from a radically student-centered perspective. And even if you think back to how we've learned and how schools have operated from the rows of desks and the single purpose rooms, long corridors, and they were really optimized for managing students. Going back to the control, the factory models, right? As kids were brought into schools for only till 8th grade and then out into the workforce and into the factories. It was all for managing. And I think radically student-centered can flip that, right? The building supports how they learn, how they collaborate, the movement, the ownership, the belonging, and even going into the future, like what is school even for, right? We have AI, like does AI give the facts, and now schools are going to be the experience and how to actually be humans in the world? I don't know. It's fascinating time in education. I think we're at one of those inflection points. The pandemic was also an inflection point and changing things radically. And now we're in this okay, we're 6 years beyond, but now what is this new future we're living in? So exciting times.
Absolutely. Jeff, I think I know you've answered that question, but I just wonder from a person who's been in the educational circuit, I don't know, room, right? You obviously have been an administrator and a teacher and every other aspect of it. For you, what does it mean? I've never gotten to ask you this, by the way, so I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
It's important because one of the things Jesse just brought up was, from the teacher's perspective, right? And, teachers are amazing. They're not paid enough. Their benefits aren't great enough. This and this. Put that aside and remember they only have a job because, right? And so what is that because? The why? And it's the student. So am I improving the work that child's doing? Am I making their life better? Am I making them feel more safe, more supported? What is it? And so radically student-centered means that we as adult humans have to be able to give up some power, take some risks, and have the courage for the change to happen, right? And it's okay that students take charge. It's okay that I don't have to sit up front and be the sage on the stage all day. It is okay for our next generations to be better than us, to be smarter than us, and to take what we have and make it exponentially better.
You know, when we work with schools at K-12, it's not just about furniture design, it's about impact. Our radically student-centered approach puts students at the center of every decision. From that first conversation to the final walkthrough, we're focused on creating spaces that actually work for the kids, the teachers, and the community. So if you're looking to do more than just check a box on your next project, let's talk. Visit K12.com. That's KAY-TWELVE.com and see how we're helping schools transform learning one student at a time. Because at K-12, it's not just about projects and furniture, it's about purpose.
So ultimately, when you look at the philosophy behind radically student-centered, or Jesse Miller's philosophy behind radically student-centered, how do you think that impacts and influences projects and the decisions that you make in each project that you do or that you participate in, right? Like what it's like.
First and foremost, I think it changes your priorities immediately. So many of our school districts are dealing with either increased population, declining enrollment, program-based type designs. But if you really focus on and they're trying to accommodate pupil size, right? And if you instead ask of how many classrooms fit in this school or this or that, and we ask, how many ways can the students learn in the spaces we're providing, I think it leads us to so many different choices when we're in the design phase and programming phase outside of, checking the boxes that we're going to deliver a school 12 new classrooms, right? We're now looking at maybe flex learning areas instead of corridors, right? Breakout zones instead of unused square footage, natural light, visibility to reduce anxiety and improve engagement, right? I'm talking about this upcoming. I mean, things like SELs and all of this mental health and never used to be part of an education program. It's now in every district's LCAP practically, right? Our world has changed in, career tech spaces. I brought that up a little bit ago, that feel real and not simulated. I talked about the Dr. Dre Performing Arts Center, right? If we're preparing kids, and again, I know we pushed everyone to go to college, and whether that's the right choice or not, and whether everyone can. But if these kids at, K-12 facilities are experiencing things that the real world already offers, they already have the talent, and, you just don't know what can happen. There's a story, the tale at Centennial High School is that, they set up a portable with a bunch of musical equipment for Kendrick Lamar when he was a student there. Right now, imagine that he didn't have a portable. He had an actual space that had the equipment. Like, how much different, could this Grammy award-winning artist have done? Right. So spaces, students want to stay in. That's the biggest one. I think, as a kid and going through K-12, I was like last to arrive at school and first to leave, like boom and boom, get me out of here. Right. And which is funny. I look back at my educational career and think how funny it is. I hated school so much. Right. But now we talk about like some of the schools I've designed and been a part of, like they can't kick kids off campus. Like they're open till 9 p.m., 10 p.m. and kids still want to be in these spaces learning from each other, which is really, if we really get deep here, that is the education of the future, is kids learning from other kids, not necessarily the teacher on the stage, right? It's the group work, it's the collaboration.
To the definition of success, right? You build a space where people want to be and those kids want to be. And to me, I think that describes success when it comes to design and what a district has been capable of achieving, especially with the school culture and community culture and every other thing. Not to interrupt you, sorry. but you're like, big points, Carla. Big
Yeah,
points
no.
here.
I think no, it's great. I mean, because like when we design those type of spaces, what you actually do, if we go back into and do a post occupancy evaluation, those are the schools, those are the spaces that, behavior problems go down, right? Staff workload actually improves, right? Because, it's almost like paradoxical, and, you wouldn't think this stuff occurs, but, you have to understand the human rational side of things for it to make sense versus how we've always done it and how education has always been delivered. And I think it does take trust. It takes, there's a scariness to spending, $50 million on a new building and, oh my gosh, we're going to try this as an experiment, but it's not really an experiment because it works, right? And there's enough case studies to prove this works, right? I think back as we were talking about learning, as if we talk about philosophies, I just think about myself now all the time as a student. And I was a kid that I cannot listen to a lecture. I can't. I'm going to doodle. I'm going to tune them out. Everything. I have to do. The minute I do, I learn. And I learn it real quick. But trying to soak in information, trying to read it myself, trying to do all that stuff doesn't work with me. I in one ear, out the other. But if you just let me experiment and do it, I would learn it right away. So I think, as we talk philosophy, and again, that's where how these kids learn, how many ways can they learn? How do we provide those opportunities for them to do the learning how they want to do it? That's the key. And then you'll see by default, you'll see the behavior problems go down. You'll see the test scores go up. You'll see the information stay with these kids. And then you'll see, what we ultimately want too is a satisfied teacher workforce. They'll be happier. That, they're not having to be so many different things that they play, nurses, therapists, right?
I always feel like you look at schools, right? And you have kids. We had someone last time, I'm like, you have 2 kids, right? And she's like, no, I have no kids. And I'm like, gosh, okay, I don't know how that happened. But our teachers spend more waking hours with our kids than we do as parents. And you think about who influences the future of our future, and teachers that's a big component of what they do, whether or not people realize it or not. But as a parent, I'm like, as my kid's teacher, what do you need me to do? Because you have more time with her or him or whoever than I do. So how can I support you? I don't need you to support me. I need to support you because you have a heft of 28 to 32 kids. I've just got this one knucklehead in my house that you get more time with, right? And so they're molding more of our kids than what we sometimes care to realize and give them credit. Yeah.
100%. Which is, important because, firms like PBK and what we do at K-12 and a lot of people, by including the teachers and the stakeholders and everything into those, vision conversations and collaborative workshops or whatever you want to call it, allowing them the opportunities to share how they facilitate or how they're willing to take risks is ultimately important as well. Because if we have the adults that are watching the children teach each other and who can recognize that I'm actually facilitating and I'm going to teach, I'm going to be an expert in some areas, but I'm not always going to do that, right? That's a big part of what you think too, isn't it, Jesse, of the work you guys do?
I mean, 100%. I always advocate our districts to first and foremost when we're programming and planning these to include teachers, right? We have got to hear them. The next level to that, though, is having student workshops because teachers will inherently, and I've grow victim to this myself, right? You think about your current day job. You think about the current way you're teaching. You think about, oh man, I don't want to learn another thing. So I'm not going to tell them, like, I don't want to raise my hand and say, we really should be doing this because I'm just trying to learn what I'm trying to do right now, right? But it's the students, when you get to the student workshops, then they're like, oh no, this is where we think what we need, right? And so you get this juxtaposition of ideas of where teachers want to go, where kids want to go, and then where's that in between? I always tell teachers in my first workshop, always, when we're doing this, is I want you to think 15 years in the future of what you need. It's hard to stretch their thinking sometimes, because a lot of times they want to say, I need more storage space. I need more whiteboards. I need more of this, right? But it's like, no, imagine a world where you are not doing what you're doing. This is not how you're delivering education anymore, right? So what
future you need? And two, like if you had a new teacher come in, you're 10 years down the road in your career and you have a brand new teacher come in, what is that teacher going to need? And what can you set up for them? Because you're paving that path. Like you're writing the story for them in the way that they're going to come in, and they just have to redress it. So we have that hurdle all the time too. But it's a big question because it does come to the I, me, this is my struggle right now. But if that struggle wasn't there, what would it look like?
Yeah. Remove it all, right? And again, you're going to have different generations of teachers within a school, and each one of them sees it different, right? So I think it's just understanding the full perspective. Each school also has its own community, its own set of visions and goals and what works and what that community is about. And so, you really got to understand where they want to take it as well. So even, if we can get community workshops in our projects, we definitely try to advocate for that as well and hear all the voices, right? At the end of the day, we've got to make it all work within a budget, within a defined program. But when you think about the impact a project has, that we're putting a building that's going to last 50 to 100 years, you really don't want to leave any stone unturned of what this space really should be. Because if you do, then we didn't do our job as architects and designers to really understand the education that needs to be delivered there, right? At our firm, we definitely do that. We take that measured approach, bring the educators in, bring the students in, and get the buy-in and the excitement. If we can build excitement before ribbon cutting day, that's always a great thing. And because projects take a long time, right? And a lot of times the students that are giving you their input won't even be the students that get to experience the space, right? But they're excited for the future generations of either their younger brothers or sisters coming behind them,
I know Jennifer, my daughter, was the freshman class in a new school, and she was able to sit on one of the design committees going into it, but it opened with just a freshman class, this large high school. And it was one class of freshmen that were in there, and it grew. And she was just like, how cool is it? And then my brother went to that school. So it's, it sort of leaves that. What's the biggest takeaway when it comes to, I'll go back to radically student-centered, that you want people to remember about radically student-centered as it relates to whatever it is that you do, right? Like, what's a takeaway you want to leave listeners with? I mean, what if it's a challenge, right? Can you challenge people to do something differently?
Well, I mean, I would challenge us. I would challenge us that, as a profession that is impacting generations, to think bigger and think better and think outside of education architecture as a business. I always tell people all the time that had worked on my teams that this is the one architectural sector that can impact the world bigger than any of the other ones. And I said, great, hospitality is great, love a nice hotel, love a good restaurant. Doesn't leave me like bettering my kid's life, right? Transportation. And again, not to knock on any sector, but I just feel that education, we all have to go through it. Every American has to go through the education system, whether that's private, public, charter, neither here nor there. You're going to get some, even homeschooling, right? We're designing schools for school districts to have their homeschool students go to a place that they can actually learn these, skills a little better, so that they're at least experiencing these environments that the public school kids are, even if you're homeschooled, right? So really the challenge that I'd put forth to so many of the firms that do educational architecture, educational design is to slow down, pause for a minute, and go back to what that radically student-centered philosophy that I have is everything we're doing for the student? And is it really making their learning better? And why? Right? You'll see a lot of rooms and we pick color schemes and, we put up a blue wall. My question to our interiors team was always, why blue? It looks pretty. Okay, but that's not a why. A why is that blue color has the statistics behind it that say it'll increase learning outcomes by 15%, right? Every thought should be thought through when you're designing a building. I used to challenge my teams all the time to create 3D visual models and walkthroughs of our designs. And I want to walk through slowly and turn around 360. And if every space isn't designed the best that it possibly could, then we've failed. I've been to too many schools that are really beautiful. They're award-winning schools, but there's always locations within that school that look like they weren't really well thought through. They were either back of house, they were, CTE corridors or things like that could have been better, right? Like every square foot of a school should be the best it possibly can be because somebody is going to experience that square footage, right? At some point, a student is going to walk through every square footage of your building in some way, shape, or form or another, even bathrooms, even everywhere, right? And so how do we create spaces that really resonate and provide opportunity? I think about like even just corridor nooks, right? Like sometimes you have like little nooks, like could you have fit a little piece of desk there that a student could just stop down with their laptop and learn in a spot that used to not be anything, right? It used to just be a blank corridor piece, and a corner or something. We have a project at one school where it was an existing campus modernization, corridors, double loaded, right? Nothing we could really change. Budget didn't do much, but we took the lockers out and created, by taking the lockers out, created nooks and learning spaces that allowed, monitors in the corridor, like little breakout spaces, right?
Yeah.
Or students work on display, right? Like I preach a lot about, I want to have learning on display. Kids need to shop their future. They need to walk through a campus and they need to see what other kids are doing because, hey, maybe I have an interest in that in the future. Because if the goal of our designs isn't to give kids an idea of what they want to do with the rest of their life, then we've kind of failed, right? We don't want to send kids to college and have them switch majors 12 times. They should already have had the passion for a particular field, not necessarily the major, but for a particular field before they even get to college, right? Like I've seen this on display. I've been in a CTE class. I've seen my friends and they do the homework. I want to do that, I think that's where I would really challenge our profession to think about the students, think about their futures. I think a lot of times we think about kids in the present. Like, how are we going to teach them right now, right here? But I would say, I want to know what that kid, how are we going to teach them right here and right now? But how is that going to impact them 20 years from now? Because now they're sitting in my position or they're sitting in your guys' position and they're having the same conversations we have, but just 20 years in the future, or their future CEOs or their future educators. And they can sit back and they can be like, well, I want a school like this because this is what worked for me when I was a kid and it led me here. I think the biggest roadblock to doing what we need to do is parents saying, well, it was good enough for me, it should be good enough for my kid, as we talk about education in schools, right? But we could get rid of that. Let's stop thinking that way and think about how in the future, we're going to have all these successful people because of the spaces we created.
Well, everything's so different from what worked for me to what's going to work for even my kids now. I look at, I have a gap with my kids. I have a 27-year-old and a 15-year-old. And what was okay for that 27-year-old, and what worked for her is not working for the 15-year-old just because of, evolution of, everything. So, well, Jeff, what do you think?
I can't wait to look at the evolution of Jesse's work and the lives you're touching. It's amazing. I love the work that you're doing and what you're preaching. It's real and it's prudent.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have TikTok, when I was going to school as an educator, right? But TikTok is an educator now. Like, you got to think that way, right? And so, I just think back to my education. I had one architecture class offered in high school, and it was a shop class. And we built, so you actually had to use machines to build a house, but you used CAD. I see the spaces we're creating now with the CTEs and all that stuff. Like, how much more could I have been confident in the career I chose before I even chose it, right? Like, had I been able to...
Is that what made your career? Was that,
honestly, it goes back to Lincoln Logs. You remember Lincoln Logs?
Oh, yeah. I had Lincoln Logs.
Yeah, Lincoln Logs.
Just don't give them the little tube.
Yeah, I liked building things, and so Lincoln Logs were my first set, not Legos, but Lincoln Logs. And Lincoln Logs, always built a house or built a building, right? Different than Legos, you could build anything, right? So kind of it set the course of my life. I knew where I was going right out of high school. I knew that, I never wavered, right? But if I would have had those programs, I look at kids nowadays and I just think, and even my daughter, like even probably your daughters, Carla, like, I just feel like, man, you're not taking advantage. Like, I didn't even have these things back then. And I would have been in so many programs and doing all these things if I just had gotten the offerings,
By my meeting at her school this morning, if we were sitting in there with all of her teachers, and it's like, well, what can you do? Like, how can you take advantage of what's offered to you? Because it's offered for you. Right? Like, it's for you. So what are you going to do with something that is just at your fingertips? And she walked out and she's just like, I don't know what you meant by that. And I said, well, I mean, there's so many opportunities that you're missing out on. So what the school offers do for you? And how can you participate in it? And how can you get involved? And she's like, I'll think about it.
Well, I mean, and that's what you're doing, right? When we're building these schools and when educators and curriculum directors are working in schools to develop their curriculum and their programs, and superintendents and boards are looking at the job markets and what should we be offering our kids, it's like every moment is a chance to choose between what's easiest for the system, what's easiest for the kids, right? What your daughter just, I'll think about it, right?
I'll concur.
Or what's best for the student's future, right? Sometimes stuff doesn't align and sometimes it does. And I think, again, going back to the takeaway is just, if everything we do, if it doesn't improve a student's, daily experience, then it's probably not the right decision. And we probably made an error somewhere, and those errors have consequences. Like, that's the other thing we need to understand is, like, errors in our field have consequences on kids learning and teachers teaching and the future of our country and world, right? So,
well, and not short-term consequences, because look at how long you just said that these buildings last. They're long-term.
Yeah, they're long-term consequences, right?
Well, thank you for joining us. And thank you, Jeff, for being the host. I'm so glad that I got to be your co-host and be here with Jesse. So if you enjoyed what you're listening to, go and subscribe to the Better Learning Podcast on all of the different channels. And we'll look forward to talking to you next time.
The Better Learning Podcast is produced by Matt Rogers and edited by Kelly Jones. The views and opinions shared on this podcast are those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily represent the perspectives of their affiliated companies, organizations, or associations.